Hey everyone, welcome back to another one of my compliance stories. Today's tale is about how my former boss made a huge miscalculation trying to cut costs and ended up losing a lot more than she bargained for. So here in Ukraine, life has always had its challenges. But as a people, we've never backed down from a fight. Despite everything our country is going through right now, I want to share a more personal story that goes back to the year 2000, a time filled with uncertainty over Y2K. Back then, I worked for a major telecommunications company. Everyone was panicking about potential global computer failures when the calendar rolled over. As a software engineer and hobbyist inventor, I came up with a few unique tools to tackle the problem, including a program that could automatically detect Y2K-related issues, saving someone from having to sift through endless lines of code manually. These programs were initially meant just for internal use, but the two founders liked them so much that we patented them and eventually brought them to market. A few years later, those tools became the company's main product. I was promoted to head of R&D and received a lot of recognition for my work. But not everything stayed positive. One of the co-founders retired, leaving his business partner, Karen, as the primary shareholder and decision-maker. Let's just say we didn't always see eye to eye, and I started feeling uneasy about my place in the company. Sure enough, my fears came true soon after Karen took full control. She called an emergency board meeting and unveiled a new strategy focused entirely on cutting costs, despite having no technical background or real understanding of the industry. While she'd previously been a silent partner, rarely seen and unknown to most of us, she suddenly became the face of the company. During her speech, she dismissed every question and concern raised by employees, treating them like unnecessary distractions. It was clear things were about to get a lot tougher around here. And to make matters worse, she decided to single me out as an example of where cost-cutting should start, accusing me of wasting time and money on my latest project. I was furious, not only because it was humiliating, but because even though others were named too, it still felt very personal. When she finally finished speaking, there was a heavy silence. We stood there awkwardly until she held up her hand, waiting for applause. We weren't allowed to leave until she got it. The next morning, I was called into her office. I assumed it wouldn't be good, especially after what happened at the meeting. True to form, Karen had completely redesigned the space to suit herself, removing all chairs except hers. I stood for over an hour while she insulted my work and questioned my commitment to the company. I tried to hold my ground, but that only seemed to fuel her anger. She told me that after cutting certain projects, salaries would be adjusted. She made it clear she was disappointed in how much I cost the company, basically trying to guilt me into lowering my own salary. I stayed quiet and let her rant. When she realized I wasn't going to give in, she ordered me to finish my current project within a week, cutting the timeline drastically from months. I tried to explain that this new product was going to be a premium service that would bring in significant revenue, but she barely listened. Quality clearly didn't matter to her anymore, only cost savings. I've always believed in delivering quality above all else. That used to show in my work. But Karen only cared about money and didn't seem to care about the company's reputation or our customers. She kept pushing me to rush the project and cut corners, ignoring every concern I raised. Eventually, I looked her in the eye and said, "No, I refuse to compromise the quality of the product." That's when she exploded in anger and threw me out of her office. I thought she was going to fire me on the spot, but something stopped her. Maybe she enjoyed trying to control and torment me instead. A week later, Karen called another board meeting, apparently making this a regular thing. After talking privately with each employee, she announced the areas of the company she wanted to improve. And in a move that was universally hated, she declared that 90% of employees would have their salaries reduced, supposedly for the good of the company. Most departments saw cuts of around 5%, but the biggest blow came at the end. Karen announced a 30% pay cut specifically for R&D, my department, calling it a result of time wasting and financial loss. That was the last straw. I stood up in front of everyone and confronted her directly. I told her what she was doing was illegal, that our contracts didn't allow for unilateral salary reductions. Some of my coworkers murmured in agreement, which only made Karen more defensive. She tried to shut me down by saying I wasn't a team player, but the truth was, she was driving away the very people who built this company. Little did she know, she was about to make an even bigger mistake, one that would come back to haunt her. So there I was, still standing in the meeting room when Karen abruptly dismissed everyone and told us to get back to work. I hadn't even made it to my desk before I was called back into her office, this time away from any witnesses or support. She continued the argument right where we left off, but now on her terms. From a drawer, she pulled out my termination papers and practically threw them at me. As she did, she insulted me relentlessly, calling me selfish, insubordinate, and greedy. This was her victory. Getting rid of me meant one less salary for the company to pay. But what she didn't realize, or maybe chose to ignore, was that those patents we developed, they were in my name. When the company originally filed for them, the other founder had insisted they be registered under me as a sign of appreciation for my contributions. That meant the company only had a license to use them while I was employed there. The second they let me go, that license was gone. I tried to explain all of this to Karen before I left the office, but she refused to listen. Whether she was ignorant of the legal implications or just too proud to admit she was wrong, I'll never know. Either way, she made her choice. The next day, I reached out to a lawyer and confirmed everything I already suspected. Under Ukrainian intellectual property law, the patents were mine. With my lawyer's help, I gathered all the official documents and registrations, just in case I'd need to prove ownership later. It came with a wave of guilt, honestly. I had spent years building that company alongside my coworkers. The idea of turning the tables felt like betraying something I'd worked hard for. But Karen left me. No choice. I wasn't sure if she'd take legal action seriously, but I was confident I'd win in court if it came to that. In the meantime, I couldn't afford to stay unemployed for long. I had a very specific skill set, so I started looking for new opportunities in the same industry. One particular company stood out, a competitor that had been trying to catch up to us for years, but struggled due to a lack of technical expertise. I won't go through every detail of the interview process, but it went really well. My new boss recognized my value immediately and happily agreed to my original salary and a management position. It was a good move for both of us. I landed on my feet, and they gained not only my experience but also the rights to the patents Karen had completely overlooked. I was welcomed warmly, and for the first time in a while, I felt free from the grip of a toxic leader. Within 2 months, my new company began rolling out improved versions of my products and quickly gained traction, even attracting customers who used to be with Karen's company. As for my old workplace, things were quiet at first. But then, just a few weeks later, I found out that Karen had launched a brand new product, one that functionally did exactly what my patented tools used to do. She had made minor tweaks, clearly trying to bypass my patent protections. That was the moment I knew I had to act. After talking with my lawyer, we sent Karen a cease and desist letter along with notice of a lawsuit for infringing on my intellectual property. As expected, she didn't respond kindly or quietly. The case ended up in court, though it didn't last long. Her company had no legal right to use those products anymore, and Karen didn't exactly help her own case by arguing with the judge and refusing to cooperate with her own attorney. It was clear she was furious, probably the first time in her life she wasn't in total control. But her outbursts only hurt her more, making her look unreasonable and proving how little regard she had for the law or for people in general. The court ruled in my favor. Karen's company was ordered to stop selling the products immediately and issue refunds to existing customers. Without the products, without customers, and without revenue, the business was basically finished. Karen stormed out of the courtroom in tears, realizing her career was likely over. Meanwhile, her former customers needed solutions, and my new company was more than happy to step in and provide them. Eventually, I heard that Karen's company declared bankruptcy and was liquidated, leaving many of my former colleagues jobless. I spoke to my new management and pushed to hire most of them, not just out of loyalty, but because they were talented and experienced. Together, we built something better than the old company ever was. An old coworker later told me that Karen had been forced out by the board after the lawsuit, and apparently, everyone cheered. Things calmed down after that. Life went back to normal, or at least a new version of it. About 2 years later, I heard what eventually happened to Karen. Somehow, she managed to land a managerial role at a smaller company. But this time, it was middle management, far from the top spot she once held. And this time, she wouldn't be the founder. Let's hope she learned something, though I doubt it. So, I thought maybe Karen would make a decent salesperson after all that. But honestly, after her company went under, and she lost everything, I don't think anyone in the industry wanted much to do with her. Her reputation was pretty much ruined. In the aftermath of the bankruptcy, my new company ended up buying the remaining assets and rights from Karen's business for basically nothing. It wasn't much, but it helped solidify our position as the leading player in the market. We were now the biggest and most successful company around. But this next story is one I'm telling in memory of a close friend who recently passed away after a short but brave battle with cancer. One day, she went in for what doctors thought was probably a routine biopsy, just a precaution. 5 weeks later, she got the call that she was moving into hospice care with only days left to live. Saying goodbye brought back a lot of tough memories and a few funny ones too. That's why I want to share the story, because it shows who she really was. Not long after I started working from home, a coworker suggested I check out a local meetup group he was part of, a tiki club that met weekly at different spots. Some weeks it was tiki bars, others it was 50s-style diners or dessert places with that classic retro vibe and good coffee. This particular place was one of those spots, cozy, fun, and full of interesting people. It was only my second or third time hanging out with the group, but I already liked them. A bunch of the guys rode motorcycles, some even had Vespas like me. I had an old 70s Honda CB550 that I loved tinkering with. I was sitting there with my coffee, chatting with a guy who'd just bought a new Triumph Bonneville, when someone came up, sat down uninvited, and took a drink from my coffee cup. I was about to lose it, like, what the actual? Until I looked over and saw it was Wayward. That was her nickname. And honestly, seeing her again was a shock. We had dated briefly a long time ago, a short, sweet summer romance after I graduated high school, and she was working before heading off to college. Then life happened. She went off to school. I joined the Navy, and we lost touch completely. Back then, the internet didn't exist the way it does now. At this point, I'd been married for 15 years and had a kid. She was still single. Our reconnection was strange, but totally platonic. We both became regulars at the same meetup group, and that dessert diner was always our favorite spot. Every time I got a coffee, she'd steal it and sip from the other side. It turned into this weird little thing between us. Being part of the group was a nice escape for me, something to get out of the house while working remotely, which could get pretty isolating. But not everything was perfect. There was this older woman in the group. Let's just say she had a serious need for attention and loved stirring the pot. She wasn't a fan of Wayward, even though Wayward never did anything to her. In fact, Wayward contributed a lot to the group and its events. But Miss Attention Whore? Not a fan. My wife, on the other hand, thought the whole dynamic between me, Wayward, and the rest of the group was adorable. She didn't have any interest in joining the club herself, usually used the time to hang out with her own friends or have them over. She actually found it charming how Wayward and I interacted. And trust me, she had zero jealousy in her. She couldn't stand people like Miss Attention, especially when they tried to stir up drama. When I told her about the latest antics from Miss Slut, she laughed, and boy, did she have a temper when provoked. Classic redhead energy. Over the next few years, the group stayed mostly fun, though we had to deal with various levels of harassment and whispered rumors from Miss Attention. Then came the annual planning dinner for the club, and, naturally, she'd had more than her fair share of box wine. Wayward was running late because she was tied up with a patient. When she finally arrived after dinner had started, she gave me a friendly hug. That's when Miss Attention leaned in dramatically and stage whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Gee, I wonder what Miss Raccoon would think of that. Maybe someone should tell her. Miss Raccoon, by the way, was clearly my wife. I saw red. Without missing a beat, I pulled out my phone and speed-dialed my wife. Oh, you've got something to say to my wife, do you? Let me help you out here. I put it on speaker. Hey, honey, someone here has something to say to you about me and Wayward. I handed the phone over. Now, keep in mind, my wife doesn't get jealous. But she hates nosy busybodies trying to stir up trouble. And she let Miss Attention know exactly how she felt. She tore her apart, mocked her, read her the riot act, and told her in no uncertain terms to stay out of other people's lives. If she liked the way things looked so much, maybe she should try minding her own damn business. The entire room fell silent. Miss Attention looked like a fish out of water, turning redder than the wine she'd been drinking. And then, out of nowhere, my wife started laughing. Her laugh is contagious, and soon, others started chuckling too. Miss Attention turned even pinker, then bolted out of the room, a 60-year-old woman crying like a toddler. Well, in the spirit of the Tiki Club, here's to you, Wayward. Fair winds and following seas. Down the hatch. And the next story is titled, Boss Ruins Entire Company. I'm a 37-year-old woman who worked for a homegrown company for 15 years. I started as a sales associate and worked my way up through the ranks, from assistant supervisor to supervisor, then branch manager, area manager, you name it. Several years into my career there, the head of marketing, who also happened to be the owner's wife, decided she wanted to bring me onto her team. I figured it was a chance for a fresh start, especially since I was feeling burnt out in sales. I asked my direct boss, Debbie, for her approval and to let her know about the offer. The owners hadn't given her a heads up, they just went straight to me. Still, she gave me the go-ahead, and I made the move to the marketing department as a graphic designer. For a while, I was happy. But working under Brenda, the owner's wife, was a nightmare. She had these explosive episodes where she'd scream at us and literally throw things if she didn't like the designs or ideas we presented. I stuck it out mostly because of my coworkers. We'd become really close. Brenda was so terrifying that we all breathed a sigh of relief whenever she wasn't around. Productivity actually went up when she wasn't hovering over us. So, back to the office, or should I say, back to the never-ending drama. Lizzie, the head of HR, would often come by just to make sure we were all sitting at our desks doing work-related stuff and not chatting. She'd also point out little things like papers being out of place or lights being too dim, even though we always told her we preferred a more relaxed lighting setup. It was those small, irritating things that slowly got under your skin, but we tried not to let it get to us. Then came the pandemic. As a graphic designer, I thought I was set to work from home like everyone else. But oh, how wrong I was. At first, we worked remotely using WeChat for check-ins. Along with regular chats, we were also required to send selfies of ourselves at our workstations to Lizzie. No big deal at first, just a quick thing to do before starting the day. Everything seemed fine, except for Lizzie's constant backhanded comments. She'd question whether we were really at our desks or if we were sneaking off somewhere else. She even claimed she'd seen some of us at the grocery store during her time off, though, mysteriously, she never named names. We just rolled our eyes and ignored it. I personally never left the house anyway. I was living with my grandparents, my mom, my sister, and her 2 young kids, including an infant. There was no way I was going anywhere. But when the company announced it was time to return to the office, something strange happened. Resignation letters started pouring in from my department, one after another. Soon enough, I was practically the only one left. Everyone was scared to go back. Vaccines weren't widely available yet, and the risk felt real. But since I stayed, I was handed a mountain of new responsibilities. Updating the website, which I had zero experience with. Managing all 20 social media pages. Designing layouts, doing product photo shoots, assisting online customers, ringing up purchases, handling cashier duties, walking to the nearest courier post, a 20-minute trek to ship everything out, and doing live selling sessions as well. From a 6-person team, it had become just me juggling tasks meant for an entire department. You might be wondering why I didn't just quit right then and there. Well, the truth is, my family needed me to stay. My mom had been laid off from her job as a restaurant manager. My sister's husband, who works overseas, had to cut his hours because his company was barely holding on with skeleton staffing. So, between his monthly support and what little I made, we were keeping the whole family afloat. I barely had time to breathe. Most of my tasks went unfinished simply because the workload was overwhelming. I tried to catch up during slower times, but customer inquiries kept coming in nonstop. Brenda promised she'd get someone from another department to help, but no one ever showed up. Lizzie kept telling me someone's on their way, but again, crickets. Meanwhile, Brenda never even stepped foot in the office anymore. She was terrified of getting exposed to the virus and exposing her twins, who were still toddlers, and her mother-in-law, who was a total germaphobe. So instead, Debbie, my old supervisor from the sales team, was brought in to oversee me. Back in the day, Debbie was great. She gave me top reviews, and I always passed evaluations with flying colors. But this time around, she seemed more interested in saving her own skin. She and Lizzie took turns playing good cop, bad cop. And remember, I was already doing the work of 6 people. No bonuses. No raise. Just a salary of a little over $200 a month. That's about what it came out to in US dollars. Then, they hired someone new to handle the website. Let's call him IT guy. Finally, one task was taken off my plate. But guess what? They paid him $600 a month, 3 times what I made, just to take care of the website. That hurt. I had been with the company longer, worked my tail off, and hadn't even gotten a $50 raise. That's when I decided to start looking for a better-paying job, somewhere I'd actually be appreciated. Oddly enough, IT guy looked up to me. He respected that I'd been around longer and had more experience. We became friends pretty quickly. I didn't resent him for the bigger paycheck. None of this was his fault. In fact, he ended up becoming my inside ally. Lizzie probably thought he'd spy on me, but instead, he warned me whenever Lizzie was snooping around. Like when I stepped away for water or to use the restroom, Lizzie would come looking. He told me straight up, and I confirmed it myself. Coworkers saw it too. One time, I went to the restroom and sure enough, Lizzie followed me in just to make sure I wasn't sneaking off. She checked in with other people trying to find me, and when I'd go to her office asking if she needed anything, since they said she was looking for me, she'd just shrug and say, "Oh, nothing. I don't need it anymore." This happened multiple times a day. Eventually, Debbie sat me down and asked what was going on, why I wasn't performing well. I stared at her, stunned. "Excuse me," I said. "Brenda and Lizzie are upset because I'm not doing my job? Let me remind you, the social media pages are a mess because I've been buried under twice the workload of everyone else. I'm basically running the department alone." Debbie nodded. Yes, I know. But they're also worried you've been leaving the office too much." "Too much?" I shot back. "You mean walking to Korea Post to deliver customer orders? Because we don't qualify for pickup services?" She winced slightly. "Well, Lizzie saw you at a place that wasn't Korea Post." "Oh, right," I said. "At the pharmacy. Because I had a headache and needed medicine." Should I have just called in sick instead? So, while I was stuck in that miserable job, things only got worse when they started interviewing applicants to replace the people who had already quit from my department. It felt like I was under constant surveillance, like there was a CCTV watching my every move. Even going downstairs to grab a glass of water felt like I was committing some kind of crime. I was truly unhappy, but no matter how hard I searched, I couldn't find another job. Meanwhile, IT guy had taken over meetings with other departments since I was completely swamped with online orders. One day, he told me about a conversation he overheard between Brenda and Sam, the boss's sister and also Debbie's direct supervisor. Sam asked, "Why aren't our pages being updated?" Brenda shrugged and said, "I don't know. Ask OP." Sam replied, "Is she not working?" Brenda, "No, she said she's busy." Sam, "Busy doing what?" Brenda, in a sing-song voice while looking down at her nails, "I don't know." Later on, this exact moment was confirmed by Lizzie's assistant, one of my closest friends at work, and several former teammates from the sales department who were present during the meeting. I had made a lot of connections there, and many of them still supported me. Most of the current supervisors and assistant supervisors had even been trained by me. Let me tell you, I was furious. Back during the pandemic, we were required to fill out a form listing all the tasks we worked on each week. We'd check them off or add notes if they were still in progress, approved, disapproved, etc. We also had weekly meetings where I gave updates on everything I was handling, and Brenda would sometimes pile on new tasks. There was absolutely no way she could claim she didn't know what I was doing. But instead of acknowledging any of it, she just kept adding pressure. That's when I really kicked my job search into high gear. Eventually, I managed to land a part-time job, only 4 hours a day, but it paid twice what I was making at my full-time job. That extra income allowed me to save up for a decent computer so I could finally break free from the nightmare I was trapped in. Once I had that computer, things started turning around. Companies were hiring again, and I began sending out resume after resume as soon as I got home from work each night. Finally, I landed an offer from an international company, and they paid in dollars. The salary was more than double what I used to make, based purely on my skills and experience. Now came the sweetest part, my revenge. I didn't hand in my resignation until I had the signed offer in hand. I wanted to make sure I covered all my bases. A few days before Christmas, the official start date confirmation came through, and I couldn't have been happier to sign and return it. On Christmas morning, I sent my 2 weeks' notice to Brenda, CCing both Lizzie and Debbie. I didn't hear anything from them until the day after Christmas, when Debbie called me. I don't remember the exact conversation, but I do recall telling her I had accepted a better-paying position. She asked if I'd consider staying if they matched the salary. I said no, money wasn't the issue anymore. I just didn't want to work in an environment where I was constantly watched and treated like a suspect. She also mentioned that Brenda was panicking, shouting at Lizzie and demanding she do something to keep me from leaving. They decided Debbie should be the one to talk to me first before taking any action. But I was firm. My mind was made up. Debbie respected that and said we'd see each other again the week after New Year's. For my 2 weeks' notice, I made sure to include all the holidays, so by the time we returned to the office, I only had a few days left to wrap up and hand over everything. On my last day, we had a Zoom call with Brenda. I said goodbye to everyone, wished them all the best, and stayed professional. Lizzie jokingly asked, "You really won't change your mind? Is that your final answer?" I smiled and said, "Nope, I won't." Then I added, "I don't see any problem with me leaving, especially since apparently I haven't been doing anything anyway." The look on Brenda's face was priceless. I logged off, walked to the server room to lock out my account,